Jason and I had been together for a little over 5 years, engaged for 8 months, and until a few weeks ago, I truly believed I knew exactly how the rest of my life would look. We met through mutual friends at a small housewarming party. The kind where people drink cheap wine out of mismatched glasses and sit on foldable chairs. He and I instantly clicked over our mutual hatred for overpriced IPAs and our nostalgia for old 90s cartoons. The conversation was natural and warm. That night turned into a date, then into months. And eventually years. Our relationship grew at an easy pace. After 1 year, we were practically inseparable. After 2 years, we signed a lease together on a little apartment. By year 3, we adopted Beans, our overly dramatic cat who immediately decided he owned everything we owned. And last summer, on a quiet morning hike, Jason nervously dropped to one knee. He fumbled the ring box so badly, I thought he'd send it flying down the hill, but the moment was sweet and real. I said yes without blinking. We set our wedding date for October and began planning. Well, I planned. Jason mostly nodded along, asking the occasional question, but usually letting me handle it. I didn't mind. Not then, but around 3 months ago, something changed. Anytime I showed him a venue or decoration idea, he made odd comments. Things like, "That's a lot to spend on one day," or "Do we need such a big wedding?" Nothing openly negative, just hesitant. When I texted him cater options or flower samples, his replies were short. "Looks fine. Sure. Whatever you want." He blamed stress at work. His construction company had taken on a new huge project, so I tried to be patient. Around that same time, he started hanging out more with his coworker Paul, the type of guy who thinks commitment is a joke and loves making comments like, "Marriage is a trap." Jason would go out for beers, late night games, things he never used to do regularly. When he'd come home, he'd check his phone constantly, barely talk, and seem miles away mentally. I brought it up to my best friend Lena during a coffee run. She said it sounded like pre-wedding jitters and suggested I plan a sweet date night to reconnect. So I did. Last Friday, I booked a nice Italian restaurant, put on a dress I hadn't worn in forever, and stocked Jason's favorite beer in the fridge so it would be ready when we got home. I wanted it to be special, a moment that reminded us of who we were. But the night was awful. Jason barely spoke through dinner. He kept rubbing the back of his neck, staring at the menu without really reading it. When I gently brought up finalizing our honeymoon plans, he finally dropped the bomb. "I'm not sure if I'm ready for all of this." Not the honeymoon, not the wedding. Marriage itself. My chest tightened. I tried not to cry in the middle of a restaurant full of strangers. He mentioned conversations with Paul, horror stories about marriages falling apart, how overwhelming everything felt. I didn't know what to say. How do you respond when your fiancé suddenly questions your future after 5 years together? We barely spoke on the drive home. Once we got inside, he said he needed space to think and slept on the couch. The next morning was worse. We moved around the apartment like strangers, just sharing a space temporarily. He said he was going to watch the game at a bar with Paul and a few coworkers. I didn't even argue. I was too exhausted emotionally to fight. Lena convinced me to leave the apartment for a few hours. We got coffee, wandered around Target, joked about ugly throw pillows, anything to distract me from spiraling. By the time I drove home, I felt steady enough to breathe, but everything changed the moment I got a text from Kyler, one of Jason's coworkers. It said, "Are you okay?" Things got weird at the bar. My hand shook. I called him immediately. Kyler hesitated, clearly uncomfortable, but eventually told me the truth. The guys had been teasing Jason about getting married, and Jason, drunk, irritated, trying to look cool, said, if she were prettier, I'd be more excited about marrying her. Just like that, in front of everyone. About me, Kyler told me he and some other guys called Jason out, but Jason brushed it off as just joking. I sat in my car crying so hard I could barely breathe. When I finally walked inside, Jason was passed out on the couch, reeking of beer, totally unaware of the humiliation he'd put me through. I locked myself in the bedroom with Beans and cried until my chest hurt. The next morning, Jason tried to smooth everything over with bacon and coffee, his classic sorry I screwed up routine. He tried to explain, saying he didn't mean it, that he was drunk, that he was trying to shut the guys up. But the damage was already there. I packed a bag and left for my brother Elliot's apartment. He didn't even ask questions at first, just hugged me and told me he had my back. When he finally heard what happened, he nearly grabbed his keys to confront Jason, and I practically had to wrestle him to sit down. Jason kept texting apologies, long messages, short messages, multiple messages, but I sent only one: I need time. The next morning I called in sick to work. I couldn't pretend everything was normal. And then around 9 a.m., my phone rang. It was Valerie, Jason's mom. Crying, she told me Jason had called her the night before, a complete mess. And there were things I needed to know about what was really going on, so I drove to meet her. And now I'm sitting in my car staring at my engagement ring, terrified of whatever she's about to tell me, and wondering if my 5-year relationship just ended without even giving me a chance to save it. Thank you all for the overwhelming support on my original post. I never expected thousands of people to read it, let alone send messages of encouragement. I've been staying at my brother Elliot's place, specifically in his storage room turned guest space, and surviving mostly on Oreos and anxiety. For those asking, yes, I met with Jason's mom, Valerie. And I'll get to that part. But so much happened in the last 48 hours that I need to walk through it in order. After posting, I spent most of Monday morning curled up on Elliot's spare futon, scrolling through comments and trying to breathe normally. Around noon, my best friend Lena showed up with sandwiches. She didn't knock, she just let herself in like she always does and handed me a turkey and provolone like it was an emotional support animal. She gently reminded me that I couldn't hide forever. Jason and I shared an apartment, bills, responsibilities, and eventually we'd have to talk. She wasn't wrong. I just didn't feel ready. Later that afternoon, I drove back to our place, rehearsing what I wanted to say. I wanted to be calm, mature, focused, no yelling, no tears, but my stomach dropped when I saw Jason's truck in our spot. He should have been at work. I walked in and found him on the couch, surrounded by my color-coded wedding binders, the same ones he barely glanced at for months. Beans was curled beside him like nothing was wrong. He looked terrible, exhausted, guilty, scared. Said he took personal time from work to figure things out and had been reading through everything I'd planned, trying to understand how he messed up so badly. I didn't sit. I stood by the door with my arms crossed. I told him looking at centerpieces and catering lists wasn't going to fix the fact that he publicly humiliated me. That's when he broke. He apologized. Again for what he said at the bar, calling it the stupidest moment of his life. He claimed he was drunk, insecure, and trying to impress his idiot friends, but I wasn't letting him off that easily. I reminded him that even before the bar incident, he'd been distant, cold, dismissive of our wedding. Those little signs were not alcohol. Those were choices. Eventually, painfully, the truth started coming out. Jason admitted he had been overwhelmed. With the wedding, with work, with life, with expectations. Then he said something that hit me harder than anything else. He was afraid of becoming his father. Jason almost never talks about his dad. I've only heard bits and pieces over the years, always vague, always with a forced shrug, like he didn't care. But now he said it all. His father walked out on their family when Jason was 12, cheated on Valerie with a coworker, built a new life in another state, abandoned Jason and his sister, broke their mother's heart. Jason confessed he is always worried that something inside him was wired wrong, like he inherited this built-in switch that would eventually flip and ruin everything. He didn't trust himself to promise forever because he didn't trust he wouldn't become the man he hated most. I told him trauma isn't genetic. Choices are. He didn't believe me. When I asked if he had talked to anyone else about these fears, he admitted he'd been confiding in Kyler, one of his newer coworkers. The same Kyler who reached out to me after the bar incident. It made sense. Kyler had seen everything unravel long before. I had then came the part that shattered me. I asked him the question I had been avoiding since Friday. Are you unsure about marriage? Or unsure about marrying me? The way he hesitated, even for a second, was my answer. He finally said it wasn't specifically me. But part of him wondered if we'd grown in different directions over the years. How I had changed. How he had changed. How we weren't the carefree 20-somethings who met at a housewarming party anymore. It wasn't malicious. It wasn't cruel. It was honest. But God, it hurt by the time he stopped talking. My heart felt like someone had pulled it apart piece by piece. I told him I needed space. That I would be staying at Elliot's for a while. That he should use the time to figure out what he actually wanted. Not just what he was scared of. As I grabbed my purse, my phone buzzed. It was 3 missed calls from Valerie, Jason's mom. I had completely forgotten our meeting earlier that morning. I had told Jason his mom wanted to talk to me, and his face drained of color. He asked what she said. I told him she'd been crying and said it was important. He wouldn't look at me. I asked him what he told her. He said it wasn't his place to explain. That terrified me more than anything he'd said all day. I stepped outside and called Valerie back immediately. She answered on the first ring. She sounded frantic, apologetic, emotional in a way I never heard before. She asked to meet right away. I told her I'd be there in 30 minutes as I grabbed my keys. Jason said quietly, "Whatever she tells you, please remember that I do love you." I didn't respond. On the drive there, Jason's sister Karina called me. She was panicked, asking what happened, saying Jason wasn't answering her messages. Then she accidentally blurted, "Is this about Maria?" I nearly crashed the car. Maria? Who the hell was Maria? Karina backtracked immediately, telling me to talk to Valerie and refusing to say more. My stomach was in knots as I pulled into the coffee shop parking lot. I saw Valerie through the window, red-rimmed eyes, gripping a mug with both hands. Jason texted me again as I walked toward the door. "Whatever Mom tells you, please know I never meant to hurt you." I put my phone in my bag. Then I walked inside to hear the truth. Thank you again for the support on my last posts. I'm now writing this from Lena's pull-out couch, wrapped in a fleece blanket that smells like her lavender detergent, because I couldn't bring myself to go back to Elliot's storage closet of a guest room. And I definitely couldn't face my apartment with Jason still there. So let's talk about the meeting with Valerie. The coffee shop was crowded when I got there. Students from the local community college filled most of the tables, tapping on laptops and eating muffins. Somehow, Valerie had managed to snag a corner booth with high-backed seats like a tiny, fragile shield against the world. She looked wrecked. Not in a dramatic way, just tired, sad. Her hair wasn't styled the way she always wears it, and she didn't even have mascara on. In 5 years, I had never seen her without her usual makeup routine. That's when I knew this was serious. When I sat down, she hugged me tightly. We ordered drinks. I got black coffee, even though I wanted something sugary and comforting. Ordering a caramel latte with whipped cream felt wrong for whatever this conversation was about to be. After a few minutes of small talk, Valerie finally exhaled and said, "This is about Maria." I felt my stomach drop to my knees. Maria, the new project coordinator at Jason's company. I'd only met her once at the company holiday party. She'd been perfectly nice, warm smile, simple gold necklace, nothing memorable. Still, hearing her name felt like a punch. Valerie explained everything slowly, her fingers shredding a napkin into tiny pieces. Over the last few months, Jason had developed feelings for Maria. Nothing physical had happened, according to him. But emotionally, something had shifted. He didn't cheat, she said. But he had started imagining a life where he didn't choose me. That hurt more than cheating ever could. Suddenly all the little changes made sense. Him being distant, him checking his phone constantly, him spending more time with work friends, his sudden doubts about marriage, his hesitation about our future. It wasn't random. It wasn't stress. It wasn't work. It was Maria. When I asked Valerie why she was telling me this, She broke down and said she refused to watch me be blindsided like she had been. That's when she opened up about her own marriage, how Jason's father had emotionally checked out long before physically leaving. The little things she ignored. The excuses. The emotional distance that turned into betrayal. She didn't want history to repeat itself. And suddenly, the dots connected. Jason wasn't being cruel. Jason wasn't being malicious. Jason was being a coward. He wasn't sabotaging us, he was sabotaging himself, so that I would eventually walk away and he wouldn't have to make the choice. The joke at the bar? The doubts? The hesitation? The emotional withdrawal? All of it was him trying to make our relationship implode so he wouldn't be the bad guy. We talked for almost 2 hours. Valerie kept apologizing for her son's behavior, saying over and over, "You deserve someone who chooses you. Someone who doesn't run." When we finally parted in the parking lot, she hugged me and whispered, "Don't force someone to stay who's already halfway out the door." It broke me. I sat in my car afterward, silently crying for a long time. I stared at the 3 texts from Jason. "I'm sorry. I love you. Please come home." Not one mention of Maria. Suddenly, all felt real. I didn't go home. I drove straight to Lena's place. She didn't ask questions. She just pulled out the sofa bed, handed me a warm bowl of soup, and let me exist in silence. At around 10 p.m. after Lena went to sleep. I sat there scrolling through photos of Jason and me, vacations, birthdays, selfies, holidays. In every picture, we were smiling, arms wrapped around each other like the world couldn't crack us. But now those memories felt like someone else's life. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Hi, this is Maria. I know you blocked Jason. There's more to this story than you've been told. Can we meet tomorrow?" Just the 2 of us. My heart stopped. I stared at the message for a full minute, palms sweating, chest tight. What more could she possibly say? After a long moment, I typed, "Where and when?" And that's where I'll leave this part. Karina arranged the family dinner at her apartment, and from the moment I walked in, I felt the heaviness hanging in the air like humidity before a storm. She'd set the table with simple pasta and salad, trying to create a calm setting, but nothing felt calm. Valerie sat quietly with red eyes like she had cried all afternoon. And Paul showed up with that smug half-smile he always wears when he thinks he knows more than everyone else. Jason arrived last, looking exhausted, eyes puffy, hair a mess like he hadn't slept since everything fell apart. The first 20 minutes were this painful performance of small talk we all knew was fake. Everyone pushing their food around without taking a single bite. Everyone too aware of the tension to pretend we were there for anything normal. It felt like we were all sitting on the edge of something sharp, waiting for someone else to fall off first. Finally, Valerie broke the silence with a shaky breath, saying we weren't there for dinner. We were there to talk about everything that had been happening. And to finally face the truth none of us wanted to look at, I took a deep breath and told them exactly what I'd learned. Everything from Maria's explanation to what Paul had been instigating for months. Watching Paul's face twist from fake confusion into defensive arrogance almost made me sick. He tried to interrupt, saying he was just looking out for Jason. Acting like this was some harmless misunderstanding. But Karina shut him down immediately, demanding me stay quiet and let me finish. Jason sat hunched over, staring at his untouched pasta like the answers were hidden somewhere under the sauce. When I told them Jason had developed feelings for Maria, even if nothing physical happened, he nodded weakly without arguing, admitting he had turned a friendly coworker into a distraction because he was scared of turning into his father. Valerie winced at that, pain flashing across her face as old wounds resurfaced. And then came the worst part, Jason, admitting that the joke at the bar had nothing to do with Maria. It was him trying to impress Paul and the other guys. Trying to look unbothered, trying to pretend he wasn't overwhelmed by everything happening. That didn't soften the blow. Hearing him confirm the words, the tone, the context, made the humiliation burn even deeper when Karina reminded everyone that the wedding was only 3 months away. It felt like someone took all the air out of the room. I could picture my dress hanging in Lena's closet, the deposit receipts, the RSVP list I had worked on for weeks, the playlist we created together. It all felt like a ghost version of the life I thought I was building. The words slipped out before I even fully processed them, but I didn't think the wedding was happening anymore. The room went dead silent. Jason opened his mouth to speak, but I raised my hand and told him I needed to finish. I told them how I had been spending weeks trying to make sense of everything. How every sign had been there before the bar comment, the distance, the hesitations, the doubts. But I kept telling myself it was stress or work or something temporary. I said I deserved someone who didn't need his sister, his mother, his coworkers, and a crisis to realize what he wanted. Someone who didn't hide emotional connections with other women behind fear and stress. Someone who didn't insult me in front of his friends to seem cool. Someone who didn't question whether we were right for each other after 5 years of planning a life together. Paul muttered something under his breath about me being dramatic, and both Valerie and Karina snapped at him instantly, telling him he'd said enough. Jason insisted he loved me, and that everything he did was because he was scared of becoming the kind of man his father was. But all I could think was that he had already hurt me in the exact same way, not by cheating, but by abandoning us emotionally, by letting fear take priority over honesty, by letting everyone else's opinion shape our future except mine. The conversation dragged on for hours, doors opening and closing to old wounds none of us were prepared for, truths none of us wanted to hear, tears that everyone kept wiping away only for more to fall. Around midnight, after every argument had dissolved into silence and every justification had melted into exhaustion, we all realized the same thing. The wedding wasn't happening. And our 5-year relationship had broken in a way that couldn't be repaired by counseling. Apologies or promises made too late. Karina drove me home afterward. Quiet but supportive, telling me that no matter what happened with Jason, I was still family to her and Valerie. When I walked into Lena's apartment, the weight of everything hit me so hard I could barely breathe. I sat on the pull-out couch, staring at the wall while my whole future unraveled in my head, piece by piece. Lena came out half asleep, sat next to me, wrapped her arm around me, and didn't say a word. We stayed like that until the sun began creeping through the blinds, the world still turning even though mine felt like it had stopped. I didn't cry right away. I didn't scream. I just sat there realizing that sometimes things don't end with dramatic fights or slammed doors. Sometimes they end quietly, with two people admitting that love isn't enough when honesty and certainty are missing. And that quiet ending hurt more than anything. 3 months have passed since that night at Karina's apartment, the night everything quietly, painfully unraveled. 3 months of slowly pulling my life apart from Jason's, piece by piece, until nothing was left but the parts that belonged only to me. I'm writing this now from my new 1-bedroom apartment, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes and mismatched furniture, the kind you buy when you're starting over and trying not to think too hard about what used to be. It still feels strange waking up alone, making coffee for one, making decisions without checking if someone else is okay with them. Strange, but not unbearable anymore. Right after the breakup, Jason and I still had to deal with the practical stuff. The apartment we shared, the furniture we bought together, the bills split between us. Elliot and Lena helped me pack Jason's things while he was at work, labeling everything neatly and leaving it in the living room for him to collect. It felt surreal separating 5 years into 2 piles. His coffee maker, my favorite blanket, his video games, my framed prints, our cat. Bean sitting confused on the armchair as if he knew the world was changing but didn't know how to stop it. Once Jason took his boxes, the apartment felt hollow and echoing, like a stage after the actors walk off. I lasted 2 more weeks there before breaking the lease, paying an extra month just to get out of that space heavy with memories I didn't want anymore. Finding a new apartment was harder than I expected. Rent by myself was a lot, and suddenly every grocery trip, every broken bulb, every ride to work, everything was me figuring it out alone. I became the person who buys store-brand cereal, uses coupons, checks for discounts I never used to care about. Grown-up things I should have learned before my late 20s, but better late than never. The balcony at my new place is tiny, but I bought cheap dollar store planters and tried growing herbs. The basil keeps dying no matter what I do, but the mint grows stubbornly, almost aggressively, and somehow that feels symbolic. I found the wedding binder in a box last week. I didn't open it, just stared at it for a long minute before shoving it in the back of my closet. I canceled everything weeks ago. The venue deposit gone, the florist offering partial credit, the DJ recommending his therapist brother in case I needed someone to talk to. I changed my relationship status online and received the flood of messages I'd been dreading. Curious classmates, old coworkers pretending to be concerned, relatives wanting details. I posted a quick statement about a mutual decision and turned my phone off for the rest of the day. Later, I uploaded a picture of my new apartment keys with the caption, "New Beginnings." It felt small but real. Jason and I barely spoke after the key exchange, except for the occasional logistical message, mail, bills, the shared cloud storage we forgot to separate. Everything polite, distant, transactional. Karina told me things had been rough for him, that Maria stopped talking to him and even requested a different team at work, that Paul and Jason had gotten into some argument and weren't as close anymore. I didn't ask for details. I didn't want to know. My life was moving forward, even if it felt like I was dragging myself at first. Then, a month ago, Jason texted asking to meet. I wasn't sure I was ready, but curiosity won. We met at a coffee shop near my new place, neutral ground, somewhere public where emotions couldn't explode. He looked different, thinner, almost worn down, wearing a shirt I didn't recognize. The first minutes were awkward small talk, the kind that feels like strangers pretending not to have shared years together. Then he pulled out a small journal and placed it on the table between us. He'd been seeing a therapist. The journal was part of it, daily reflections on patterns he wanted to break, his relationship with his father, the fear he never dealt with, the way he let other people influence his choices. He said things he never would have said months ago, that he'd been unfair to me, that he'd let fear make decisions instead of courage, that he wished he had talked to me sooner instead of trying to outrun the things that scared him. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't ask for another chance. He just wanted me to know he was trying to become someone better, for himself, not for me. And surprisingly, I believed him. Not in a romantic way, not in a maybe someday way, just in a quiet human way. I wished him well, genuinely, and he wished me the same. We walked out of the cafe with no dramatic goodbye, no promises, nothing unresolved. Just two people closing a chapter they once thought would be their whole book. What surprised me most was staying close to his family. Valerie texts me every week, memes, garden pictures, random updates. Karina and I meet every other Sunday for breakfast, laughing over pancakes like nothing ever changed. They've been careful not to drag Jason into conversations, always respecting my boundaries, always reminding me that our relationship does not have to disappear just because my relationship with Jason did. And I'm grateful for that more than I can say. Therapy has been helping me too. Not because of Jason specifically, but because the breakup made me realize how many compromises I'd made, how many red flags I justified, how often I minimized my own needs to avoid conflict or discomfort. I'm learning to take up space again, to say what I feel without apologizing, to trust myself instead of waiting for someone else to validate my decisions. I started hiking again on Saturdays, something Jason always complained about because he hated early mornings. And the first time I went alone, at sunrise, the quiet felt like finally being able to breathe. I'm not dating, not yet, though my coworkers keep trying to set me up with someone. Maybe eventually I'll be ready. Maybe not. For now, it's enough to wake up and feel okay. Not excited, not devastated, just okay. Neutral, steady. That's a kind of peace I forgot existed. The biggest surprise, though, the honeymoon cottage. We had a 10-day non-refundable rental on the coast, the one we spent months planning around sunsets and beaches and little restaurants nearby. I ignored it for weeks, unable to face the reminder. Then Lena said something that stuck with me. Go anyway, just you. Why should he get to take that trip for me too? At first, the idea felt ridiculous. Going alone to a romantic cottage meant for two. But then I thought about it more and it felt brave. Like reclaiming something that was supposed to be part of my life, not his. So next week I'm going. Alone. I packed books, downloaded podcasts, bought a swimsuit based on comfort instead of aesthetics. I don't know if I'll spend the week healing or crying or discovering something about myself. Maybe all three. But I'm going. The other day at the grocery store, a song Jason and I used to call our song played over the speakers. 3 months ago, I would have broken down. This time, it only stung for a moment, a soft ache instead of a deep wound, like pressing on a bruise almost healed. I finished shopping, walked to my car, and realized something small but important. I wasn't thinking about what I lost anymore. I was thinking about what might come next. I don't have everything figured out. My shower still goes from warm to boiling without warning. My basil keeps dying no matter how gently I try to keep it alive. Some nights I still reach for my phone to share something funny before remembering there's no one to send it to anymore. But I'm getting there little by little, one quiet, steady day at a time. And for the first time in a long time, the future doesn't feel like a deadline or a disaster waiting to happen. It feels open. It feels mine.